Hello again everyone. Today I'll be doing another coaching session. In this video, this coaching session will be of a summoner named MEL Feroz from the server LAN. I will provide the information in the form of my constructed term macro tips. Macro tips is basically the name which I have given to those chunks of information which are in numbered form on a Word document, which will be able to be applied not only to a specific game or to a range of champions, rather this information can be applied to all games where you're able to improve your decision making and rather all your information relating to game knowledge in each game. By applying all these macro tips which I've suggested in this Word document, you will be able to improve your play, which will not only relate to this specific replay analysis which I will be analyzing, but rather to all games. Prior to the start of the replay analysis, I want to discuss my first macro tip. This macro tip is based on always performing a pre-game analysis prior to the start of the game in order to know your pathing. Jungle pathing is key to every jungler, and it enables you to achieve certain goals in each game and get a lead on the enemy jungler. In this game, you should be protecting your top lane or your bottom lane or both with as many wards or control wards as possible, due to the fact that Nasus, which is in the enemy top lane, will always be pushed in by your Kennen. Nasus is a laner who is always under his tower just trying to Q farm, so he will be very open to ganks, where I mean your laner Kennen, so you want to protect him as best as you possibly can. This similarly applies to your bottom lane, where the enemy has a Janna lane, and so this means that your laners will most likely always be pushed up to the enemy's towers due to the fact that a Janna lane is a very passive lane, and so you also need to protect them. You should also be focusing on ganking bottom lane where possible, due to the fact that you have a very aggressive lane. In this specific game, you have Zyra and Vayne, which is versus Janna lane. And so you are able to apply a lot of pressure in this lane, given that the enemies, Janna and the ADC, are pushed up to a considerable extent. Additionally, instead of only focusing on ganking bottom lane, you should only gank mid if he is greatly pushed up or doesn't have his ultimate. If you instead of ignore this and you avoid ganking mid lane due to the fact that Echo has high mobility. So I will now look into the specific replay analysis and look at the first timestamp, which I have noted at time 250. This is the introduction of the game. You have just finished clearing your camps in your bot side jungle, your top side jungle, meaning that you have just finished clearing your blue buff and you are level 3. You see that your Kennen is very pushed up to the tower, and at the start of the game, if you watched your mini-map carefully, you would also realize that bottom lane came late. As you can see, bottom lane is not there at the start of the game, and this means that the enemy jungler, Lee Sin, is starting on his bot side first, meaning that if he has started on his bottom side, this means that he is going to path upwards towards his red buff, which is in the same direction that you will be traveling in, as you can see in this replay. Because you know this information, you need to use it to your advantage. And because you know that Lee Sin is going to be pathing up to red buff, you need to warn Kennen that a gank is going to come. Or if you don't decide on warning Kennen that a gank is going to approach him, you instead need to sit inside of the specific bush and wait for Lee Sin to appear. And when this happens, by sitting in the tri-bush, you will be able to initiate a counter gank, because there's a high likelihood that Lee Sin will gank top. He can either gank top or mid. However, due to the fact that he is pathing towards red buff, he is most likely going to go to gank top first, since he's so pushed up. And because of this, you could have easily got off a gank due to the fact, or rather a counter gank, due to the fact you know that Lee Sin is going to be top side. You can see this right here. It happens after you're done clearing Scuttle Crab. You see Lee Sin approaches top, and he ends up successfully getting a kill onto the top lane. Provided that you had sat in this tribush here and waited for Lee Sin to come, then you would have been able to initiate a counter gank, and you would have been able to kill at least Nasus if there's any laners you would be able to kill, and you would have avoided Kennen from dying most likely. This is crucial to the Pacific game. This is mentioned here. You should always acknowledge where the enemy jungle will be in the early game if possible. And use it to your advantage. I see that you place a ward at a location in the game where you attempt to invade Lee Sin at the start. You end up walking to here and placing a ward in this bush. There's no reason for placing a ward in this bush. It provides no information of Lee Sin. You know that he parted upwards, meaning that he would have already taken his red buff. And because you know that he would have already taken his red buff, since you cleared your blue buff already, and he's clearing about the same speed, this means that he'll most likely be at his golems right now, which is his upper camp. And because of this, what you should have done, instead of placing a ward here, is you should have placed a ward by maybe on this bush or the bush next to red buff, instead of placing it there. And what you should have done, instead of walking around here like you do towards red buff, you could have instead pathed upwards by his golems and tried to kill him, because Warwick has a very strong early level 3, and it's very few junglers that can fight him in level 3, and so you have an advantage. You could have fought Lee Sin by his golems here, and because of the fact that he has Nasus as a laner, if he was to rotate, even if he wanted to rotate, which he's most likely not going to do because he has to farm minions which are trapped on this tower, you would be safe by trying to kill Lee Sin, because Nasus is not a very strong early game champion. And so this is all mentioned here. Should have checked for Lee at his golems, as he would have most likely cleared his red already. Provided he didn't check his golems, he should have cleared his Scuttlecraft, then wait in top tribush to initiate a counter gank at the top lane. Nasus/Lee is weaker than Kennen/Warwick in the early game. Additionally, you would have had the advantage since the enemies would have had their cooldowns before you would have used their cooldowns, meaning that you would have your skills up while they already used theirs, so you would have the advantage. This is crucial to preventing Lee Sin's snowball, which does happen in this game, where Lee Sin gets a kill onto Kennen, and this puts you quite behind. It might not seem like it, but Lee Sin is able to get a kill, and because he's able to get a kill, he's able to snowball his lead. And this has a rippling effect. Even after you had stood here waited for the gank, you could have counter-ganked him, and Warwick is a very good counter-ganker, so you could have had a great advantage here. As mentioned, Warwick is an excellent counter-ganker, mostly because of his fear and his ability to run down champions. I will just give a brief look at the time I have mentioned the first macro tip, which is at 6:05, just to give more information on this macro tip. As you can see on the minimap, you can see that the only laners you have are mid lane and bottom lane. Bottom lane is extremely pushed up, meaning that they're most likely going to get ganked by Lee Sin, as that's the only lane that Lee Sin can gank. He can't gank mid because he has no laner to help him with the gank. And so what you should have done is you should have spam pinged bottom lane at this specific point in the game. By how this is linked to the first macro tip is that you know where the enemy jungler started, you know where he ended up. He ended up on red buff, meaning that he's going to back after that, and then he's going to go bot side. And so you should warn your bottom lane, provided that you know where he is. I believe they end up getting killed because of this information not being given to them. I'll just show it. As you can see on the minimap, they ended up killing Zyra because you did not warn them of Lee Sin's location. This is valid information which you need to provide. I'll now look at the timestamp 4:15. I see you clearing Dragon. I understand the reason for clearing Dragon because it's an Infertile Drake and that's the best Drake to clear. And because you get it, it's the first Drake, you want to take it away from the enemy in the early game. I understand the motive behind it. However, you should always be aware of the minimap as it regards to lane positions when you attempt to take an objective. What I mean by this is you can see Syndra is next to her tower trying to farm her minions. Echo was seen previously in his lane, and so you can easily rotate down to try and stop you from getting the Infernal Drake. Similarly, you don't have any laners in the bottom lane, and so if they wanted, they could have easily rotated also to try and stop you from getting the dragon. However, this is mostly relating to mid lane, where the mid lane can easily rotate due to the fact that his minions are pushed into the tower, and so he has no experience to be lost or any minions to be lost. And so you should be careful when you're taking objectives this early into the game, especially where you are unaware of the location of the enemy and you know that they can rotate due to the fact of the pushed up distance of the lanes. It is not warded in this circumstance, however, in a future game it might be warded, and so this is just food for thought. This is all mentioned here. It might not work as smoothly as it did in a future game, so just take this information into account. I'll now look at the fourth macro tip, which is at 450. It mentions never attempt to fight and invade in your jungle when your team is at a disadvantage. What I mean by this disadvantage is Echo has much more mobility than your mid laner Syndra, thus he can quicker rotate to assist Lee Sin if he is to invade your jungle. I will just show you where this happens at 450 in the game. You see Lee Sin attempting to clear your camp and counter jungle it. But you see Echo also rotates. The reason why Echo is able to rotate much faster than your Syndra is able to is because Echo had more mana than your mid laner. Not only that, Echo is an assassin and he has much more mobility than your Syndra. So your team is at a disadvantage in this situation of a 2v2 because the Syndra cannot rotate as quickly. Not only this, but Echo's minions are pushed up towards your laner's tower, meaning that he has no experience or minions to be lost in comparison to the Syndra, who has minions under her tower, or rather close to the tower, and so she needs to farm them. So it is more difficult for her to rotate than it is for Echo to rotate. You need to take all this information to account when you're trying to fight a 2v1, or rather a 2v2 when Syndra appears. You realize that you cannot fight Lee Sin, so you back off. However, you would not have chunked this much HP if you had just walked away knowing this information. Echo has much more mobility than your mid laner, which I mentioned. Echo can rotate much more easily since there are no minions or experience to be lost. Not only this, but you are lower health than Lee Sin. That's another thing. And so, yeah, the further disadvantage. A better decision would have been to make your team aware of the invade and went back to base. What I mean by make them aware is you should have spam pinged where Lee Sin is, and therefore they'll be able to assist you and get a kill. They ended up getting a kill in this specific replay because of the fact that they saw where Lee Sin was when he invaded you, and also not only this, but you can see that Syndra also placed a ward in the jungle, so you're able to see where the enemies are. What you should have done is, if you had a ward, you didn't have a ward in this circumstance, but if you did, you could have placed a ward in the jungle, and this would have assisted your team. And also you should have spam pinged. This could have resulted in a death if it was another game, and it could have slowed down your lead. Each death slows down your lead increasingly, and so you want to avoid each death as best as you can, which is obvious. I'll now look at the next timestamp, which is at 7 minutes. You're taking your red buff, and then you end up going mid to try and get a gank off. Notice the pathing you take. You take a pathing from the side instead of trying to take a path from the around. Around here, around the wall itself, closer to the enemy's tower, is the best place to try and initiate this gank. Or if not from there, at least from the side brush. You end up taking it from the side, not even near to the brush, and so you are very close to where Echo is, as you're not able to cover a large amount of distance to be able to try and get a kill. Not only this, but you can see you ping once, but you ping very spontaneously. What I mean by this is you ping and then you immediately go in. You don't wait any time. You just ping, and so your laner has very little time to react to try and get the her stun off, her Syndra stun. And so because of this, you ended up aimlessly taking damage you didn't need to take, because Warwick is a champion that relies heavily on his ult. Not only that, but also relies on using his Q to go through the enemy and reposition yourself to get your fare off. You're unable to do this because Echo is a very high mobility champion, which is what I mentioned in the first macro tip, where I discussed that you should only gank mid lane He is greatly pushed up, which he is in this circumstance, however you did not execute it well. Never attempt to gank a lane from the side brush when the enemy is a high mobility champion, especially when your laner isn't in a position to provide assistance. You don't have your ultimate, and so cannot catch up to Echo before he uses ultimate. You end up taking free damage for no reason due to the fact that your laner isn't on the same page as you. You do ping that you're going to engage, however it is too spontaneous for your laner to see it. Instead of taking the approach you did, you should have went around the wall for a gank rather than the side brush, and you should have spam pinged on your way so that the Syndra would be able to pull off a stun onto Echo. As I mentioned here, patience is key to initiating such a gank. You shouldn't rush ganks, never force a gank. You should always just let the ganks happen. Because you tried to force a gank and you did it very spontaneously, it didn't end up working, and you ended up chunking to a large extent on your HP, which is unnecessary. And because of this, you're most likely going to be very low on HP when you try to go in your jungle, and this might affect your clears, or rather your future ganks. Because you're playing Warwick, it is okay because you're able to regen with your Q. However, in other junglers, this could be quite crucial to your health pool. I'll now look at the 6th macro tip, which is seen at minute 8. As you can see, you go in to try and get a gank off. You ended up taking this gank from a pathing through the river and through the bush to try and get the gank off. What I would have suggested, instead of trying to take this pathing route, you should have went around through the tri-bush. Instead of trying to take this pathing, should have walked around through the tri-bush, and you would have covered a greater distance in order to pull off this gank more successfully. Be able to be closer. Should have pathed right through this tri-bush and around to cover a much larger distance, and you're able to be in front of Nasus, and you're able to get your fear off much more successfully. As you can see in the macro tip that I have mentioned, it is said in more detail. Always consider the best possible ganking path that you can take rather than being lazy in quotation marks over your pathing. Firstly, you should have spam pings on your way. This is something that you also did not do in the replay analysis. As you can see here, Kennen asked for assistance on Nasus. However, you never pinged that you were going in, and so this could have delayed Kennen's initiation. Given that he was aware when you were coming, then he could have greater been spontaneous onto the gank. Instead of pathing from the side brush to gank Nasus, you should have pathed from the tri-brush to cover greater distance. Once behind Nasus, you should immediately E him backwards toward Kennen. You always want to E your enemies towards your laners so they're able to do more damage, and it pushes them from the escape route. Then you should Q through him to get nearer to him, and lastly, ultimate only when he closes the gap, meaning when he reaches a certain distance away from you. Not as near as to the tower range, but rather around the line near to the tower range for a little distance from it. You should ult him. You should never try to ult on the tower if you don't need to. This is to avoid taking free damage. You should take your Q through him after to get nearer to him. And lastly, ultimate, as I have mentioned. Taking this approach would have secured the kill without you taking a death, as can be seen in this clip. You ended up ulting onto him, taking free tower range damage for no reason. This could have been avoided if you took another better jungle route, or rather pathing, and if you used your skills more efficiently. Each time you die, as I mentioned before, you're greatly slowing down your lead. You might think that this Kennen played poorly in this game, as can be relayed from how you played the game. However, you need to consider the mistakes you make. You should never place your focus on blaming your teammates for you dying in certain situations or you not being able to propel a lead. The only situations where I would say you can blame your team, or rather in your mind at your house, not in the game itself, is when every lane loses, and as a jungler it is very difficult to propel your lead when every lane loses. So it's more understandable in that circumstance. However, there was a lot you could have done in this game, as mentioned by these 8 macro tips I have wrote down, in order to improve your play and place a better chance at winning the game. I'll now look at macro tip number 7, which is seen at minute 12:20. You ended up getting a successful kill on Nasus, as can be seen by the death timer. And you push your lane up, which is good. You're pushing the lane up to try and get it to crash into the tower. What I would have suggested is you should have tried to get some damage onto the tower if you were unaware, if you were aware that Nasus had used his teleport already. In this specific circumstance, Nasus ends up using his teleport and you are unable to get any damage onto the tower, as you can see, which will be up here soon. So given that you were aware that he had already used his teleport, or rather it was a champion that didn't have teleport top lane, then you could have gotten some free damage onto the tower there. I'm not sure if you can consider this. However, this is vital information and this allows you to snowball your lead by getting kills and then objectives. In addition to this, you will see on the minimap that Lee Sin was clicking your red, and so provided that you had known that Nasus already uses teleport and you have to walk all the way back to lane, then you could have gotten possibly a tower, or rather chunked it to a very low health. You know that Lee Sin is bottom, so cannot assist in preventing your damage onto the tower. In this situation, Nasus still had teleport. However, if he didn't have teleport, then it should have been a close to free tower. This is food for thought, most of this information. Last macro tip I will discuss is on minute 1350. I'm not going to analyze the entire replay. The reason why I'm not going to analyze the entire replay is because most of the impact a jungler has happens in the first 15 minutes of the game. After that, it is mostly dependent on your team propelling your lead, but you need to create the lead to begin with. And then, once you create your lead, you're able to snowball the lead. In this game, you are unable to create this lead, and so the enemy Lee Sin gets too fed and has too much of a large lead, and so propels the game to a loss. You need to stop this lead. You need to position yourself to a same lead as the enemy, or rather a larger lead. So look at minute 1350 for the last macro tip number 8. Here, I mentioned to always use your champion's kit to the best of their ability. I will look at each component of this gank. So you end up taking a route through lane, which is a good pathing to try and kill Nasus. What you firstly do is you fear him. I don't recommend that you feared him first. What you should have done is you should have held down your Q. You ended up just Qing him for some damage. But what you should have done is you should have held down your Q to go through him. Once you're able to go through him, you're able to fear him backwards toward your tower. And so he has a larger distance to close to get back to his tower. After you've done this, as I mentioned here, is after you queued through Nasus to close the gap, you should have feared him back into Kennen, and you would have avoided any potential of the kill not being secured. The gank ended up in securing a kill. However, provided that Nasus had Flash or Lee Sin to back him up, the kill might not have been obtained. You want to increase the security of your kills as best as you possibly can, and you don't want to make them slip away by any chance. So you want to use your champion's kit to the best of their ability. I'm sure you are aware of this specific way you could have initiated this gank and executed it. However, maybe in the heat of the moment you did not think of it. But this is just more food for thought. I'm just trying to provide as much information as I possibly can in order to assist you in future games where you're playing Warwick or any jungler in general, though specifically to Warwick based on these mechanics. As I've already mentioned, this is most of the information I wanted to relay, as the rest of the game already is just more of what I mentioned as a clown fiesta. Anything just happens. Nothing you do will really assist you in winning the game greater than you were able to do at the start of the game prior to minute 15. In the overall view of the game, your awareness as a jungler is to a good level in the range of plat. However, your execution could have used some work, as mentioned by these 8 macro tips. Thanks for listening. This is all I have to say, and I hope to see you all next time. Bye.